what would you say the main contribution of your approach to applied science is around product development?
What we offer is impact. I think we can shortcut a lot of those development loops by leveraging simulation modelling. It's a huge disruption to the product development process, especially with the pace we work at Crux. We can deliver impact very quickly.
Welcome back to the Crux Spotlight podcast series. Crux is a leading international product design agency that designs products for a range of organisations across the world, but always with business success in mind. I'm Dominic Walters, and my job in this series of podcasts is to look at what makes world-class product design, and in particular, what makes Crux so good at it. One of the things we know about Crux is that it has class-leading scientific ability and the ability to apply that science to make effective products. And so in this episode, we're going to find out more about that applied science and how it works. And so to do that, I'm delighted to be joined by Ben Wade to talk us through it. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Dominic. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Ben, first of all, we talked about applied science. It's one of those phrases that you hear bandied around quite a lot, I think, around design. So it would be good to understand a bit more about what applied science is and how it's used in particular at Crux, please.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a relatively new discipline at Crux in terms of Crux's history. We've been around for over 20 years now. And really in the last maybe 6 or 7 years, we've had more of an applied sciences focus, which has set our core offering apart from our competitors.
Right.
And really what it refers to is a more analytical approach to product development. So really getting to the nitty gritty of the physics and the biology of what's going on with these devices, right, how they're interacting with the body, how we can optimize the devices without having to do physical testing. So the meds industry is a little bit behind relative to automotive and aerospace. They would readily use these methods and have whole departments dedicated to these modeling techniques. But the med space is catching up slowly. So we see these models just deliver huge impact over and over again across a range of different products.
And so what would you say the main contribution of your approach to applied science is around product development?
Personally, my specialisms lie in injectable suspensions. So this is a theme in the injectable space. These new generation of drugs are lower potency, which means that we need to deliver more of the drug in order to get an effect. And there's only so much volume you can inject in someone at once in your hip or your stomach. So we need to deliver these as solids. So there's a kind of a point when you're adding sugar to tea where the tea will become full and the particles will remain solids. And essentially we're injecting liquids and solids into people so that we can deliver a big dose and get the effect that we need. So that's one area. Then the second area is inhalers. So we develop a lot of dry powder inhalers at Crux and some quite novel cases of those. And we want to be able to get as much drug as possible down to the lung. Typically, inhalers get between maybe 10 and 40% if the stars align of what comes out of the device actually gets to the lung, which is very, very poor. And yeah, we're doing our best to improve that.
Yes, that does sound incredibly low, actually, really.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So we talked there about the fact that traditional delivery doesn't get as much of the active ingredient, I guess, to where it should be going.
Yeah.
So please tell us more about how the appliance of science can help to improve that delivery ratio, that delivery level.
Yeah, so the big problem is what we call inertial impaction. So essentially the particles enter your mouth and they need to make this big right-hand turn sort of down your throat, and they're just going too fast and they can't change direction. So it's all about understanding how we make an aerosol, so make particles that are really small that can separate from other particles, and doing so in a way which doesn't make them go too fast, which is really hard. So you have a big clump of particles, tens of millions, and they're really, really sticky and they want to stay like that. So it's about breaking them all up in a way that is coherent and ordered so that they can make that turn and get down to the lungs. So we can use computational modeling. So we can characterize powders and airflows. We can look at CT scans of people. So we can actually look at the shape of their airway and how the particles would travel around that bend. And also look at the device and look at how we can improve what we call aerosolization performance. So turning a big clump of particles into a fully dispersed aerosol So there's some of the ways in which we kind of apply the physics, and it's primarily through evidence-backed modeling. So making representations of devices and people in computers so that we can design better devices. Otherwise, we can spend 10 years developing a device. We don't know how it's going to perform in a real person until clinical trials. But really, we can get an idea of that much earlier to make a better device.
So you can make a decision quicker, earlier in the process.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued to know how you go from the basic physics principles that you learned when you were studying physics, how you then apply them to helping to develop a product. How does that operate? How does that work?
I think it's really understanding the mechanisms at play in the process that you're wanting to model. So in particle modeling, we'll have our particle sizes. So typically, we would like particles between 1 and 5 microns. So if you take 1 meter, divide it into 1,000 parts, you get 1 millimeter. Divide that into 1,000 again, and you get 1 micron. They're the kind of scales that we're talking about. You can't really see them with your eyes, and they're quite hard to measure, but we can measure them here at Crux with a laser diffraction setup. So it's really just taking these foundational principles and applying them to more complex geometries and mathematical models.
Right.
So we leverage the latest and greatest in commercial simulation software, as well as developing our own bespoke scripts where there's just nothing available commercially or in academia. We build our own models.
Right, okay. So it's fascinating to see how what was an academic study can then be applied to a real situation.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by how you described particles going into the mouth and having to do that 90-degree turn.
Yeah.
And how geometry, I guess, is it? Or certainly maths can help solve that. And that's fascinating.
Yeah. Essentially, it's just the inertia of the particles being just too big. And just to look back to academia, I guess where a really fast-moving academic team, people sort of associate academia and PhD studies. These things are like 3-5 years long. The pace can be just described as glacial and very focused. But I think what we offer is impact. We can deliver impact very quickly. There's an understanding that you don't always need your simulation to match the real world 99.999%. If you get a model which shows the same mechanism, but it's slightly wrong, maybe it predicts the wrong force or the wrong particle size, the insight that it gives you can still allow you to keep developing the next day and the next day and the next day. It doesn't have to be correct. It's all about insights and really finding out what's going on for things that we can't measure.
Right. So it's really about adding to the amount of information you have to make informed decisions.
Precisely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You've mentioned about the idea of an inhaler. But I know a lot of the projects you work on would be bound by confidentiality. But if there's an example you can talk us through of where the application of scientific principles of physics, if you like, and maths have helped to produce a better product.
So we've been working for the last 2.5 years to investigate ways of developing a product and a drug so that when the next pandemic hits, COVID-26, they can distribute this device and drug all around the world, and people can use it as a protective barrier in order to limit the spread of the next virus. So that's the goal. So a really cheap, easy to use device that can deliver drug to act as a barrier for the next virus. And this is very, very difficult because the human airway consists of a nasal cavity, your throat, your lungs, surface area of about a tennis court. It's just huge. So one of the first things we had to answer was, is it possible to coat everything evenly? You're painting a wall, you want a nice even layer of paint. You don't want blotches here and blotches there and some not covered. So we actually leveraged computational modeling to try and answer some of the questions of, is it possible to homogeneously coat the whole surface area? And the answer is not precisely. It's very difficult, but the simulation led us to what parameters are important in terms of particle sizes, in administration angles, the velocities that the particles enter the nose in. So it was quite a novel study, and it was a great example of how we applied this early on in the design process, not once we've got a detailed design and we're making plastic and doing HF studies, where we're doing this all the way at the start to inform from day one, really, how the product's going to take place.
So it's about speed, it's about accuracy and cost, I guess, being cost beneficial.
Impact, yeah. It's keeps coming back to that word impact, I think maybe traditionally people think of simulation as a postdoc sat in a dark room down the corridor. They're tasked with something. They are a recluse for 2 weeks and they come back with a 200-page report. And it's a huge disruption to the product development process, especially with the pace we work at Crux. So the applied sciences team often works independently, but a lot works with the mechanical engineering team. So there's constant flow of information between these two teams. Right. So it's very, very fluid, and it's always in the loop. We're always iterating and improving, rather than having these sort of 2-week stints where the design's frozen, we get results back. The design's frozen, we get results back. It's just constant.
It's a constant thing.
Yeah.
You've mentioned, Ben, the word impact a few times. What is it that you think about the approach to applied science for Crux that maximises its impact for clients?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind is that like everyone just enjoys their job. Right. People love making simulations and models. It's just a team full of really talented people who like coming to work and like solving hard problems. I think that's it, really. Yeah.
And there must be something about the culture, because knowing the principles is one thing, but being comfortable to be innovative and explore different ideas and so on. There must be something about the culture that's special at Crux. Yeah,
the bar is very high internally in terms of the standard of work that we produce. I think that's reflected in the standard of people that we hire as well. And it's really an incubator for excellence, I'd say. There's a huge knowledge hub and knowledge share. It's not competitive as in, I'm going to make a better model than you are, or I could do this better. It's a real team approach to most projects. And yeah, the standard just keeps getting better and better and better. The more software we buy in, the more people we hire from different backgrounds, machine learning, CFD, FEA, DEM, all these different modeling methods we can use. And yeah, it's just kind of feeding on itself and growing.
Yeah. Yes. Now, you mentioned, Ben, that people like doing the job.
Yeah.
So let's ask you that question. So you clearly enjoy what you do and the projects you work on, but what is it about your work in the applied science team that you most like, and why?
Yeah, I just like solving hard problems, and I like helping people solve the problems. And the great thing at Crux is the pace that we work. So I can make a model and I can design a test rig to test if my model is saying the right thing. I can come down to the lab, make a 3D print, test it in the same day. And just the loops very, very fast. And just the autonomy that we have here, the pace in which we can deliver projects and really turn around things is just immense. And just keeps it fun. It's variety, pace, and also depth of the work that we do.
So fun, variety, pace, and depth. Let me look at it from a different angle then. If I were a client, how would I benefit from what you've just described?
I think other consultancies can't offer the pace of delivery that we do. Okay. We are also very, very good, as non-biased opinion, at engineering communication. So we can synthesize these extremely complex modeling techniques. So multi-phase computational fluid dynamics, there's phase change going on, there's solids and liquids and gases and really, really complicated things going on, but we can synthesize that down to what matters to the client. We're not going to give you a 2-hour speech about all of the modeling work that we've done. We're going to deliver the impacts, and we're going to be very transparent about the limitations of the models, what it is modeling, what it isn't modeling. So it's the communication of the models that we're making to the clients that I think set us apart that step more.
And in order to communicate to the client as clearly as possible, I guess you need to understand what the client needs and what their issues are. So how do you go about getting that information?
I like sort of phrasing these things as key questions or known unknowns. So maybe each phase of work when we design a work package is answering a key question. So is this mechanism causing this failure? Yes or no? Let's go and find out. What size do we need to make this component to make it work? Let's go and find out. So it's very discrete questions, and these need to come kind of before a project, and it makes the project delivery a lot simpler, and the clients get loads of value. So it's really about defining the value before the project starts. And it's not always easy. Sometimes you have quite a big problem with a lot of contributors, and it's difficult to tease out quite where the answer is going to be. But yeah, there's all sorts of different kinds of projects.
So what you do is rooted in what you know to be the client need, and regularly, I guess, reviewed against that.
Yeah.
So Ben, we've talked about why you enjoy the job that you do. Looking ahead, what are you most looking forward to about how things are going to change and evolve in the future?
I think just the wide range of applications that Crux are applying these methods to. So we've done some work in neurovascular surgery, so designing the kinds of devices which can get inserted through the body that would reach the brain. So tuning material properties, so what would be the best material to use, how would it be best to assemble these devices in terms of the components and the order that they're put together and various thicknesses, and being able to design those in the computer before we have to make them.
Okay. So all those maths formula that I shirked from at school may one day save my life.
Yeah, they can be useful.
Right. Thank you. Ben, you've spoken about how Crux is a leading organisation around applied science. What do you think is going to shape applied science in the future? What are the factors? And what is Crux doing to keep ahead of that?
Yeah, Crux is definitely going to remain at the forefront of this through investment in both experimental and simulation outputs. So investing in developing new experimental techniques to validate and inform the models that we're developing. This is a kind of almost unique service offering at the fidelity that we do it to. So we're not just using force stands and strain gauges. We're using all sorts of different hardware and experimental techniques, collaborating with universities and other consultancies.
What are those two things you talked about then? Four strands?
Oh, force stand and strain gauges.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are they?
It's just a large test stand where you can push down on something and measure how much force it takes to push it down. So we might use this for dispensing a syringe. You can measure how much force it would take to press a syringe down.
Right, I see. Sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying about you're doing more than that.
Yes. We've recently invested in a laser diffraction test setup, so we can measure aerosolization of dry powders at up to 10,000 times per second. We have a Instron force down, so we can do temperature controlled tensile and torsion tests, so down to I think minus 100 degrees C. So a lot of the COVID vaccines were cold storage, and the material properties of that device is going to change at very cold temperatures. So there were certain device failures which we were able to debug using that cold chamber, which was very unique from Crux. We have a lot of fun. Yeah.
Now we've come this far into the conversation, and neither of us has mentioned AI yet. So I guess we ought to. What part do you see, if any perhaps, but what part do you see AI playing in applied science and how you use it?
It's relatively in its infancy right now. So I think Crux, we develop medical drug delivery devices. That's been our core offering to date, and we are expanding that as we grow as a company and in expertise and as the demand changes from industry. So right now, the main use of AI in the medical space is primarily in medical imaging techniques. So being able to diagnose what's going on in someone's body. Diagnosing tumors from a scan. So instead of a doctor having to look at a CT scan and saying, this is my diagnosis, we can get a computer model to look at that with very high accuracy and can diagnose what's going on. So that reduces the burden on doctors and also provides a check to if the doctor just can make a mistake or miss something. So that's the main area which is being used right now.
Right, yeah.
And a lot of the other applications of AI in engineering are in aerospace and automotive, not autospace. That would be a fun industry. And they're used there because the quantities and the turnaround time relative to medical devices is so fast. So it takes so long to get a new medical device approved. There's not enough data and precedence to train new models and leverage them. Whereas if you look at a aeroplane wing, it's not changed to the eye much over the last 20, 30, 40 years. That aerofoil is the same, but they have such vast amounts of data that they can train new models in order to improve that. So it's a combination of the demand isn't there from industry right now, and there's also a lack of data on which we train models from. But we see at Crux, we've developed our sort of data science capability.
Right.
If the demand's there, we can meet it.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're keeping ahead of the game by the technology that you're using, the culture which encourages learning and sharing and collaboration, and the applied use of AI where it can add some benefit.
Definitely, yeah. And there's a time and a place for it. I'm going to drop my boss, Peter Harley, in it. He used the term fancy regression, which I totally agree with. I think AI is a big sort of marketing hype ploy. I don't really want AI in my toothbrush. That's quite a cynical view, but yeah, it's not that important. It's just a buzzword that we're using for marketing, which is great, and it should be used with caution in development of things and diagnosis of things, because it's not a human, it's a kind of a fuzzy model. It's very hard to interrogate why it gives an answer. You can ask it 2 + 2, it'll give you 3, and you ask it why and you get no answer back.
Right.
So it's very hard to find out how it's trained and why it's giving wrong or right answers.
So there's always space for human analysis and human decision making.
Always. Yeah.
Okay. Ben, also looking ahead into the future, I imagine that client requirements and needs are evolving as well. So how do you think they're going to change over the next few years?
Yeah, a pattern that we've seen in terms of a demand from a client that maybe has previously been not achievable is actually the power to use the models themselves internally. So these commercial software has developed so much, and our understanding of the solvers and the way these models work has also matured alongside that. We're now able to deliver what we call democratized models. So the client will not get the full raw computational models with all the settings. They'll get a reduced, very usable version of that they can deploy internally, so that someone can leverage the model to evaluate new designs without having to pay a simulation engineer for 2 weeks to do that analysis. So it's very quick turnarounds of models. For example, cardboard boxes. So you want to design a new cardboard box for some new shampoo packs. We can deliver a model to you, and you can put in your box dimensions, the number of shampoo bottles, the weight, the corrugate structure, hit go, and it'll give you an answer if it'll work or not.
Right.
And this is an example of a democratized model. So we would develop that and deliver it to a client, and the client owns it. So it's not just a sort of time consultancy basis. It's we're actually delivering usable assets to the client in terms of models.
Right. That sounds like that's not necessarily good news for Crux, because you're enabling the client to do work that historically you have done. But what's the interest of Crux to do that?
There's always harder models to make.
Okay. Right.
There's a endless list of sort of demands and models that we can tweak, and there's always going to be add-ons to that base package where we can develop and add additional functionality. So we don't view it as a loss of business to us. We just gain it as being able to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Right. So as a client, I get able to do high-tech stuff.
Yeah.
Because you've made it easier for me to do, and you'll be working on the next stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Ben, it's been fascinating talking about applied science and how you use it at Crux. Just to finish off the conversation, what's one key thing that you would like someone listening to what we've been talking about to take away from the conversation?
I think just embrace the simulation and modeling. There's a lot of hesitancy still in the industry about leveraging these models. There's tried and tested ways of designing stuff, making them and testing them, and doing this over and over and over again. But that's quite an archaic way of doing things. I think we can shortcut a lot of those development loops by leveraging simulation modeling to understand the devices and how the devices interact with the body.
Okay. Ben, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Dominic.
And thank you to you for joining us for this episode of the Crux Spotlight podcast. We very much look forward to seeing you for the next edition.